Good afternoon, buenas noches, bon nuit. Welcome to the second part of What is Ori? The responses we got to the first panel were overwhelming and wonderful. And we realized that there is a thirst for information and for exchange on what is Ori. And many of us in the panel reflect a diversity of individuals who have come to the tradition, have been born into the tradition, have been initiated in different locations, and understand uh, the tradition from different perspectives. All the same, all branches of the same root. But because of colonization, because of location, because of context, the information may vary and express our growth, right, over centuries, working to maintain our traditions, our beliefs, and understand the sacred in the way that our parents, our ancestors did. I know that when I had my first child, I knew that he was born sacred. Second, as well, this notion that there is original sin never entered my mind. And as I got closer to the tradition through my parents and through my community, I understood that they were born sacred and beautiful. So that this conversation is amongst people who are experiencing our traditions in different locations, in different ways, in different processes. So I welcome you to the discussion. And please, you have a chat on the side so that if you have questions, comments that we might be able to incorporate into the discussion or answer, we will do so. So, buenas noches, bienvenido, welcome to the discussion. So, what is Ori? And I'll start with Babalola to give us the perspective that he brings from Africa, from West Africa. Baba, you there? Hola.
I don't. Other
I don't see
Chief
him.
Popola.
Yes.
Huh? Can we hear from you in terms of what is Ori?
Okay. Ori, in a simplistic way, is the highest part of the body. Ori is the embodiment of each individual, and it is what makes each individual unique and distinct. Ori is also the extension of Olodumare, the Maker, in us. Ori is where we have encapsulated our destinies. That is Ori. If you want to know anything about anyone, it is that person's Ori that will make you understand the person in a better way. And because Ori is the extension of Olodumare in us, it means that Ori is both spiritual and physical. So the physical aspect of Ori is what we see here. But the spiritual aspect deals with our destiny, deals with what had been designed for us to come from Orun to do while on earth here. That is where Ori is totally different from all other parts of the body. And whatever we want to do, if Ori does not support it, it is not going to work. And whatever it is that we are doing, if all other people try, the whole world try to stop us from doing it, they will fail. So, because Ori has their share of Olodumare and it has the presence of Olodumare, it is difficult for anyone to change what Ori had designed. So, in a nutshell, let me stop there first.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. So can we move on to, vamos a decir Puerto Rico, Hochi?
Hola.
Hola, Baba.
Eh, to me, is consciousness, and it's the ability to make everything fall into place with sense in our life according to the destiny that we have to work through the time that we are here. And as Baba said, it's a direct connection to Lord Dumare, and a mission that we have to complete with integrity, with good our character, to make sure that the reason we are here is performed and is completed. It will help us to unify a lot of things that Cartesian originated or Eurocentric thought uh, ruptures us and divides us from the inside out, the same way it divides our societies in order to control us. So it's very important that we don't lose the sense of wholeness and the sense of integration at all levels, because European thought, Western thought overthinks. It doesn't integrate. And or it will help us to connect and to really understand our mission on Earth.
Thank you, Hochi.
Yeah.
Let me explain to the audience that I'm going in order of what I think is age in the process of initiation or being part of these traditions. In our tradition, age is the period of initiation. It's not your age number. So that not to provide information, right? That
Okay.
tells people they're older or younger. In our tradition, we count age or we look at age differently. So I know that one of our close people who have been in the tradition for since birth is Ayoka. So if we can go to Ayoka.
Thank you, Ia Martha. I just want to first acknowledge my elders. Um, before I say anything, I'm the daughter of Ia Larisha Ama McCann and Baba Olukashe Wiles Ibaye. And I'm the goddaughter of Ia Ife Williams, Odowe Me, and the goddaughter of Ia Tima Baker Oshunari. And my Ajabona Khan and Obe is Ia Mama Coco Selassie, Okelola. And my Awal Ifa is Baba Alberto Obel Bada Ifa B. He's Ibaye. And I wanted to just acknowledge also some of my teachers who have taught me, in addition to my elders, in addition to my parents, who have taught me a wealth of knowledge. Baba Ade Ifaleri, who's Ibaye, Dr. Fukiao, who's Ibaye, Baba Alberto, and many others. And then for me, in my learning and teaching, and I mean, I was, as you mentioned, I was born and raised in this tradition. And the first notion of Ori was the understanding of the concept of self, but the concept of self within the context of a community. So the introduction of the self and the notion of the self was never void of community, but there was a responsibility to myself to be able to self-actualize as a young person, to self-actualize it as an adult, to understand the concept of Azori as the head, first, the physical head, the concept of Ori as the essence of something, the essence of a thing, a type, a being. Ori is also destiny. Ori is also the idea of a consciousness that you can aspire and you desire, and that your life works is to bend itself towards optimal potential. So the idea, the concept Ori is that you have the ability to reach aspiration, dreams, also to have lessons in your life, to teach you and to guide you. And also the idea, the last thing I'll say is that, the concept of Ori is this idea of spiritual DNA and how that manifests. And so this notion of Ori, there's multiple levels, but I won't go into that right now. But the understanding that we're constantly trying to create balance between different parts of our mental self, our physical self, and our spiritual self.
Thank you. Thank you. If we can move on to Baba Clark.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Martha. It's an honor to be here with everybody talking about Ori. Ori, I would agree with what Baba Pupula has said. Ioka, I hear words that we've spoken before. Ori, I would say, is definitely that sliver, that fragment, that element of Olodumare that exists in all of us. It's important to recognize that the idea of Ori is not limited to people. Everything, there is Ori of everything. A plant can have Ori. An animal can have Ori. A town can have Ori. The Ori is the optimal reflection, the optimal definition, the optimal representation of any entity. So when we use the terminology Oriki, Oriki literally means the saluting of the Ori. And that could be the Ori of a person, it could be the Ori of a town, it could be of a plant. And in that pronunciation, in that exercise of Ashe Lenu, the pronunciation of the Oriki is actually speaking to that essential nature of what that person is or what that thing is. So it's important for us as we go forward and tap into that concept of Ori for ourselves in our life's journey. It is where our destiny, it is where our optimal potential, it is where our optimal expression resides. And as Baba Pupula said, nothing can stop us from realizing that but ourselves. But ourselves. Because if one conducts oneself irresponsibly, irrespectfully, negatively, we can actually compromise the optimal potential that we are destined to achieve. So if one is not Omoluwabi, a person of good character, if one does not conduct oneself with Iwa Pele or Iwa Rere, then in that conduct, in that failure to conduct ourselves with good character, we can be the ones that actually can stop ourselves from realizing that destiny that we are here to achieve. It is the journey that I am on. It is the journey that we are on. The world is the marketplace. The other world is home. We are here to walk this path, to complete this journey, to realize this destiny so that we can return from whence we come. So all of that, all that has been said and all that will be said, I believe, is encapsulated and is taught in our tradition, is encapsulated in the idea of Ori.
Thank you. I would like to move on to, we're entering the young ones kind of. So I'd like for Alex to share his thoughts because he comes from a different perspective and different traditions, all grounded in the same.
Hope everyone is doing well. I'm Alex Lasalle. Just a little background. initiated 28 years as Tatandi Bilongo within the Mayombe House of Bejuco and Finda Batalla Sacarampeño from Cuba. Myself, I'm from Puerto Rico. I'm also an Omo Oshun within the Lukumi system, and recently initiated as an Omo Awo under Chief Pola and Jose and Baba Jose Rodriguez, musician, scholar, and I've been doing this basically raised within these traditions. I'm third generation within my family, within Santeros, but first generation of within the Palo traditions. So what I'm going to be talking a little bit about is Intu, which is the Bantu concept of that's the equivalent to Ori. It's the concept is the Bantu concept of the all, of a creative force. It exists in all things. It's very similar to what Baba Neil Clark said a few seconds ago when he said that it's found within everything. Intu, just like Ori, is not just for human beings; it's also found within animals, within all parts of nature, and it's what guides us towards accomplishing our life's work, our destinies. And it's the cosmic force that's created by Insambi Ampungo, the divine creator, in order to maintain balance and order within the universe and within, like, I guess, like interdimensional understanding of what the cosmos and the universe is. So it's basically, it is also associated with the head. Intu is also the Congo word for this part of your head, your forehead right here. It's also the definition for what we would consider our third eye. It's what gives us spiritual sight, but it basically it is a cosmic force that is part of the divine that allows us to fulfill our destiny and keep order and balance within the cosmos.
Thank you. I'd like Laura like to share because she is African American, but also is in another tradition, and how she comes to it. If she would share.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Martha. It's an honor to be here. And thanks for bearing with me with the technical difficulties. I had a last minute tech change. But first, I want to also acknowledge my elders as well. I am the daughter of Yalorisha Maivalnisia Pereira Giaira, initiated in 2003 in Terreiro do Cobre, which is in Engenho Velho da Federação. My Val, as we affectionately call her, was initiated by my tata at Casabranca, one of the oldest terreiros in Brazil. Our Terreiro do Cobre, was founded in 1889 by Margarida de Xangô of Coço, and her daughter, my Bianca Flaviani, is the great grandmother of my Val, my Yalorita, and so I wanted to speak their names, as well as my Ayubona, my Linchinava de Xangô, and so many of my teachers in community, Baba Raymond Crawford, Rachel Harding, Maria Nieves Alba, and so many others, and Martha Vega, of course. In terms of candomblé, the sort of understanding of Ori is very similar. I love Martha, how you said it's all really branches of the same root. And so for us, Ori refers to consciousness. It refers to character and destiny and purpose and also behavior, as well as the physical head. Ori is, similar to everyone has shared, an extension of Olodumare in every living thing. And I read recently, and I love this metaphor, that if we think of Olodumare as the light, and we look at, this life and this manifestation in the material world as a stained glass, then that light going through the stained glass, each of those colors represents Ori, and that connection to Orisha, those different manifestations of God's consciousness as it moves throughout nature, throughout humanity, and throughout the world. I think another important thing for me in my understanding is that thinking of the different dimensions of perception that are associated with Ori. So thinking of, emotion, the intellect, memory, and imagination as all ways that shape our understanding of who we are and the ways that we walk our path in this world towards our purpose. And for me, and, in my understanding as well, Ori is both the sort of means and end to achieving our purpose. And finally, I think it's important to think about the fact that Ori is constantly evolving. There's a beautiful quote I love: "You cannot step in the same river twice." And also this sense that, you know, when you go home each day, you're going home through your door as a different person than when you left out of your door. So there's this constant evolution that's connected to Ori. And then to speak really, as you know, I think is best from my own embodied understanding of Ori, particularly as a medium for Oshun, but also for ancestors, for Egun. Ori is really altar for me. It's an altar and oracle. And so it is a way of particularly connecting to the self in 3 dimensions, in the past, present, and future. And there's a Congo concept called the Kalunga line. And for me, encountering the Ori, particularly during our ceremony of Bori, is that sense of encountering the Ori in all of those different levels of consciousness, in all of those dimensions of time.
Thank you so much for sharing. There's someone who either has a phone on. Help me, Olga, because there's a weird sound going through, and I'm not sure what it is. Is it a phone that's on? So please check if your phone is on, because there's a weird sound going through. It feels like almost underwater, so I'm not quite sure what that is. Jose, Baba Jose, bring us up to date on you and your experience.
Okay. So I'm Jose Rodriguez, aka Agbola, my fan name. Also, just to follow in line with a lot of what everyone has been mentioning. First, my Oluo, the person who initiated me into Ifa, was or is Fashina Falade from LA, California. And then later, I continued my fast studies with Chief Sholak Bade Popola, who's currently here. He is been my Babai fast, I would say official since 2008, although I've been in contact with him since 2004. My first, the first time I ever heard of Ori was actually through Fashina Falade in Los Angeles in 2001 when I moved to Los Angeles from San Diego, California. And it was basically a class that he would have every Tuesdays. Eventually, he shared with me a little bit of where he got his first concepts of Ori, which was actually through these magazines that came out in the early 80s that Chief Popola was a part of, Orumila magazine, or it was from Orumila Youngsters. Uh, I have a few of those copies still. They're very, very old, falling apart. But that's where I started reading more up on Ori, and eventually my knowledge began to be expanded as the more I started studying with Chief Popola. And the things that always stick out to me the most, and I mentioned it in the first talk that we had, is the concept of Ode, like the destiny aspect of Ori, and then the belly button part, Inu, and how those two are things that we are constantly trying to keep in alignment as we're here, what we're supposed to be doing, and then the belly button is what we want to do, the feelings, the our socialization based on culture and everything, all that sets in here into Inu, and sometimes there's contradiction between the two. Which happens in everything, in foods, and who you want to be in a relationship with, and what type of work do you want to do, and clothes you should wear, and traveling. All of that is always that is trying to keep a connection between what we're supposed to be doing and what we feel we should be doing. And sometimes they're in alignment, and that's when things go really, really, really great. But I always like to mention those two to every time I speak about Ori, because it's that constant, like, trying to maintain the alignment connection there. Where we could be doing something that we feel is right, but our destiny is telling us the opposite, and that often leads us into roadblocks. But if we can make it through it, then they turn into lessons that are very valuable and blessings. The other aspects too is that just kind of like a little recap of what I mentioned in the last time too, is that when we specifically talk about Ori, as far as in the context of destiny, that there's three main components there, that Akunleya, Akunlegba, and Ayamo. The things that we chose, the things that support what we chose, and then Ayamo, the things that are given to us that we cannot change while we're here. And those are things that, at least within the Ifa tradition, as practiced in West Africa, Yoruba land specifically, that it's through initiation into Ifa, and we get that Odu that gives us that complete picture of those three things, and all those things that we picked and that were given to us, and the things that we can't change, and all that's encapsulated into our Ori, into our destiny. And every time we go for divination, we're basically getting in contact with that Ori, with that destiny that tells the Awo through interpretation through Ifa what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, long term, short term, etc., etc. So those are just some of the main points that I always feel should be discussed whenever Ori is mentioned in any type of a conversation.
Thank you. I think that one of the things that is centered in bringing this panel together or focusing on Ori is that we're in a period where almost the contrary is true, where lies are being accepted as truth, where people are sort of moving to traditions that harm you, right? Harm you in your thinking, and harm you even physically, right? To think of things in ways that are out of balance. And here we are, a community of African descendants, right? From different geographic areas, because it wasn't our choice, but there we were for whatever reasons, right? Our destiny brought us to certain places. And here we are connecting again. And this connection becomes critical because Hoti went on the trip that we organized in 1981 when I was director of the Caribbean Cultural Center. And the idea was to bring us all together, right, from different areas of the world, to say, well, why do we maintain these traditions when basically with the conditions we're in shouldn't maintain them, yet we maintain them. And now we see them growing in ways that we didn't envision previously. At least in 81, we understood that it was important to bring us together, but what did that mean? And I asked that question again. Where are we now with our traditions, right? What is the vision or the desire or the feelings that we have about our being in these traditions when still most people look at them in negative ways? What brings us to this? What brings you to this? So if I can go back to Baba Paula, what is so important about our traditions that we keep them? Whether we were in Brazil, whether we were in Africa, because when we went, we were surprised at the amount of people who were Christian. If I don't know if Hochi remembers, we were picketed when we started the exhibition, when we started the conference. And I was in shock that we were picketed, right, by people, our people, and who were calling us devil worshippers. I came out in the papers as a devil worshiper, as a voodoo priestess in a negative way, so that it was hurtful for us going there. And I'm saying now, where we need to be together, where we have to come together, how do we do that, right? Guided by our Oris, guided by our thinking.
Yes, thank you very much. Before I go into that, there is the need for me to complete what Abu Agbola had said. Ori, the way that Ori is in alignment, there are three parts, not two. Because the outer Ori is the one that deals with our destiny. The inner Ori, which is Ori No, is the one that deals with our character. But we have Ipori that deals with our being in the right place at the right time. That is actually the alignment. And that is the left thumb of your toe. That is what that represents. That is why you see that when they are feeding Ori, they will also feed that left thumb of your toe. That is when everything is in alignment. There are some people who had come into this world with fantastic Ori, and their character is impeccable, but they are always unfortunate. Something will happen when something great is about to be given. They are the first people that people will think of, but they won't be there at the right time until they give it to someone else. That's when they will come. So that is the real alignment that Ifa is talking about, that we need to do that, so that we just need to know that there are three types, not two. And that one is very important. Iretenigi had said so much about it, and that is why we need to know that when people are in misfortune, it is not always because enemies are after them. It is because they are not in proper alignment. That is that. Now, to know why we are here and why is it that people are denigrating what we are doing, I can assure you that they will denigrate it more because what they realize is that and you should know that who are the people who dictate the religious thinking of the world today? They are the Western world. Anything they don't understand, they destroy. And anything that you tell them and they realize that it is better than theirs, they will denigrate it. It is our own responsibility to make sure that we showcase what we are doing and prove, because ours have proof. We have done it many times, and we realize that there are proofs that will show the world that what we are doing is better. And don't forget that anything that you do that is indigenous to you is also in your spiritual DNA. So when we talk of Ori, we are talking of Ori from the point of view of our own gene, because we know it and we know that it is universal, because it is only the black person who has the gene that is universal. So anything we say is the correct one. And don't forget that there is a proverb that somebody said in Ile-Ife one time when they were talking. He said, the stream is purest as its source. So when you talk of the religions of the world, it comes from Africa. So religions of the world are purest at its source. If anybody decides to run it down, that person is doing so out of envy or out of ignorance or out of jealousy. That is what we need to know. And don't forget that in our own spirituality, Olodumare does not give you what you pray for. Olodumare gives you what you can manage, what you can cope with. When we are doing our prayer, have we ever put it there that, Olodumare, please do not allow anyone to subjugate what we believe in? The problem with us that I have seen is that, I said it many times, an average African, an average Latino man, we work and we build with both hands. And that is the problem that we have. Olodumare gave us two hands so that we can build with one and defend what we have built with the other. We don't defend what we have built. We continue to build, and thieves come and they continue to steal what we have done. Anything that is called religion today is African based, because they know that is where the truth is. They will go and whitewash it and bring it back and tell you what your ancestors are doing are wrong. These are the ones that we are supposed to do. Everything is in our own hands now, to group together the way we have done now and ensure that we showcase our own. Let us tell our own story by ourselves. Don't let us wait for anyone to tell our story for us, because it is not going to work. The moment we understand this, it is easier, it is better for us to understand what we need to do in order to get where we are supposed to go. When we follow our religion, when we follow our spirituality, what it will bring is not a lot of money, it is value, it is peace of mind, contentment. That is what it will bring. Our spirituality does not give us what is outside, it gives us what is inside. And that is peace, comfort. So that is why all of us need to group together and produce a set of happy, self-contented human beings that God had ever created. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Baba. Would anybody like to join in? That was sort of the conversation Baba Neil and I had this afternoon, right?
I'll jump in. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, guys. Yeah, I like to contextualize my comment because I think it's pertinent. So I am Chief Baba Neil Clark. Ade Wede Ayan Lady Toko Day Alufo Pejo Award Shobo. I was initiated in Lukumi by Osa Unko, but in the line of Osa Unko Ibaye by Ibo Okanla Charles Abramson. I am an Oloshun. I have been for 37 years. I was initiated as an Awo Ifa by Baba Fakaya De Fani in Oshogbo. And I have been a drummer since I was 13 years old. I was born in Brooklyn. So how can I say these things about who I am and what I'm about if I'm born in Brooklyn? It has everything to do with my Ori. Because in the pursuit of my understanding what it meant to be a drummer, it led me to the people and the circumstances and the situations that would allow me to travel the world. I have traveled the world for 50 years. I have walked in the company of Harry Belafonte. I have walked in the company of Miriam Makeba. I have walked in the company of Randy Weston. I have walked in the company of Leti Mbulu. I've walked in South Africa during apartheid, in Cuba when Americans were not supposed to be there. And I'm from Brooklyn. I'm from Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, do or die. And it's very important for me to say that because I believe it is because of my pursuit of an understanding of what my Ori has in store for me that has allowed me to make this journey. That has allowed to make this journey that refutes the intention of the people who oppress us and who oppressed my ancestors, who enslaved my ancestors. The drum in this country was outlawed. I'm a drummer. I'm a professional drummer. I have raised a family playing African drums. All of my children are initiated. All of my children are Awo Ifa. This all has to do with Ori. Kosho Sati Dani Be Lein Ori Ani. No Orisha can bless a person without the permission of their Ori. I could not have done anything that I've done. None of which, Marta, as you and I talked about this afternoon, none of this did I ever dream of. None of this as a boy in Brooklyn did I ever dream that I would be doing this, have experienced this, or sit on a panel with these esteemed colleagues and have this conversation. If not for my Ori allowing me, directing me to the paths that I have taken to arrive here. But it is because when I heard about Ori, I put my head to, before I knew what it was, as I studied this tradition, I put my head to the floor and invoked Ori as I did my ancestors, I did the Orisha, long before I knew what it really meant, but I knew it meant something. And in my doing that, in my invoking that presence in my life, it activated that energy around me, in me, and through me. And my understanding of what that is and what that means has grown and continues to grow. to this moment from this conversation as I continue to pursue an understanding of my optimal potential, of my optimal expression. So I think it's important to understand that Ori is the one entity. It's not Otar. It's not shells. It's not implements. Although one can receive an implement to focus one's devotion, Ori is in us from the time we are born. Before we are born, we could not be born if we had not selected our Ori. And it is that intrinsic, if that's the proper word, to our very being. And it is in the honoring of that and exercising of that that I believe we will be able to fulfill for ourselves individually and for ourselves collectively as a community.
Thank you, Baba. Ayoka, you being born into the original families of Brooklyn that were in the tradition, warriors and queens that sustain these traditions, right, in ways that now we're understanding, right, how important, how valuable, how brave, right, at that point. And there's still a panel I want to do with some of the elders before we all leave the planet. So how do you come, right, being birthed by these historical families in Brooklyn, right, looking for a different way of seeing the world and performing in the world and acting in the world and being in the world?
Thank you. I mean, I think it's so apropos that I'm going after Baba Neal. So Baba Neal and my father, Baba Lukashay, were very good friends. And we grew up in a community. So his children and myself and my siblings, we are contemporaries. We grew up together. We grew up with a consciousness that I think that was very, it was different from what our other counterparts, let's say in school or our neighborhood, grew up with. I was introduced to the concept of being African from birth, not African American. I was African. And from that idea of being that notion, and I think this leads to where we go now and where we will be in the future, is that the concept of self, which I mentioned before, the consciousness of this Ori consciousness, the understanding of your optimal self, this understanding of who you are in the world, the understanding of the essence of who you are, which is Ori, was contextualized and built in us from an early stage. So whereas there's no, the beginning point isn't trying to compare oneself to the world. It's you within a community, an African-centered community, and have already defined yourself, and therefore acknowledging and introducing yourself to the world as that, which is a whole nother way to be in the world. It's a whole nother way of self-identity for a person of African descent. When you come to into the world already knowing that you're a person of honor, you're a person of purpose, you're a person that ancestors, Orisha, Egun, have your back, that no matter what happens in the world, you have another place, another aspect, another energy that guides your steps, that watches over you, that makes corrections that you can go to. That's a different concept of self and working in the world. And if you get that early on, you're 3 and 4 and 5 years old. I'm talking about 3 and 4 and 5 year old. You already know that there's something other than yourself that defines who you are, and that you have a concept of veneration, of concept of being able to see past, present, and future, being in spiritual misas at a young age, having witness. My parents were initiated when I was very young. We were 3, 4, 5 years old in these traditions, and having a concept of ritual having a concept of community, having a concept that people in my community, I'm accountable to them as they are accountable to me, and that there's nothing that I can't walk the world. This concept of individualism doesn't exist, that there's this concept of community. And so the last thing I'll say is in terms of like where we go now, what happens with our spiritual traditions. I think that, I'm second generation initiate. My children are initiated. My siblings, it's likewise, like Baba Neil's family. There's many of me. Like I'm one, but there's many of me who like their parents, and then second and third, and now fourth generation. I think it's and during the time when I was being raised, it was Black national movement, Black arts movement. So people were coming from an educational perspective. You had the USASA, this is New York. You had people coming from the political context. You had people coming from the artistic, which was my family, Baba Neil's family, starting teaching and learning African traditions, Afro-Cuban positions, all of that, and other aspects, activism, etc. And so where we go is to continue what we've been doing, right? But on another level, right? And so my children who are now asking me, like, what does Orisha tradition mean in the future, and how do I position myself, and showing up in spaces, and which I do all the time, is to have that continual perpetuation of teaching our children, teaching them a healthy concept of self, because we have a collective Ori, meaning people of African descent. And some of those things as a part of our collective Ori and our collective consciousness there's an element of resilience, there's an element of survival, there's an element of resistance. And I think that we're always going to be in those. There's more, but I think we're always going to have that common thread. And the part of being resistant is knowing your culture, preserving your culture, perpetuating your culture, and teaching your culture. And that is resistance.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, you mentioned misas, right? I don't know if everybody who's listening in understands misas, right? But that goes to let's say in Puerto Rico. My grandmother was a spiritist, right? And that's how I grew up. It's later when I initiate in 81 that I get closer to the concept of Ori, get closer to the concept of Orisha and the history of what it brings. And so I turned to Hochi and Alex in terms of the Puerto Rican tradition, right? Because now there's an explosion because of the sacrifice, right, of George Floyd. People are now understanding how deep-seated the African traditions are in Puerto Rico, right? Pero I think that at least I grew up in in spiritism with my grandma and my mom, right? And that was in El Barrio, East Harlem. So I come to learn more about Espiritismo, the spiritism here when I start studying and come to Puerto Rico to do research. So can you talk about how then it evolves here in Puerto Rico, or how this growth on the Orisha tradition begins to grow in Puerto Rico? Because I think you were part of it. And then, Alex, if you could address like being deep-seated in Mona in these traditions, right? No te oigo. Oh, it's me. No te oigo. I'm not hearing you, Hochi.
Something wrong. Okay. Traditionally in Puerto Rico, Spiritism, since the first part probably of the 19th century, had a big influence from European Spiritism. And a lot of people, they were Catholics, because was before 1900, the official religion in Puerto Rico was Catholic. So there was no Protestant religion in Puerto Rico. It was mainly a Catholic country, and a lot of people picked up from usually Corsicans and people who immigrated from Europe who had the Spiritism, French Spiritism specifically. They brought also some Spanish people also. They brought this tradition, and it was highly disseminated because it was some kind of a way to look for answers, different from what the mainstream was giving you. So though it really was something that was practiced by complete families. Like my mother come from a spiritist tradition in which everybody was spiritist. Now that doesn't happen in all the families, because some families were more oriented toward Catholicism. But that was a fertile ground for a different kind of point of view of understanding spirituality. And that helped when the first Cubans came with the tradition. They felt close to that. And they saw Orisha tradition not only as something that could communicate, but as an empowerment of that tradition too. As a matter of fact, when we see that we have an initiation, if they do it in the Criollo Cuban form, when in the Orisha beforehand, they do the actual initiation that takes a week. They do 2 or 3 spiritual seances, like what they call the misas. So before, and they do the misa in terms of trying to make an equilibrium, or trying to give a voice to the spiritual ancestors of that family, or to do an investigation of what the situation is. It's like some kind of a little bit of a detective work in terms of the spiritual of this person. So that is closely related in the Cuban tradition. Now in the African, it doesn't work that way, or because it's work in another way with Egungun and Ebe. But I think we have a development of beliefs that are rooted in Africa, but come to us through Cuba. And on this level of people who are aware of this type of spirituality, it grows and it disseminates, because people are looking for answers, and people are looking for outside help in order to survive, or to have some spiritual power to be able to integrate in the society better. But it is demonized usually by fundamentalist Protestant churches, and of course there are a lot of santeros in Puerto Rico and a lot of people in the Orisha tradition, but they are not the majority, definitely. And it is something that still growing, because people understand and accept an option to what they have, because some of the questions that they have cannot cannot be answered by traditional belief systems. So a lot of people who are educated and a lot of people who have professional careers are being initiated constantly because they have seen an empowerment and they have seen that they have other options to understand their self and to understand the world around them. So every time that I as a priest, I start knowing more people or ask for some people asking to come to see me. The level, the educational level and the professional level of these people is higher and it's constantly growing. And that is a reality because there are some things that the way things are done and the way the system works, people have to look options for that. So it's an ongoing thing, and it's every time it's getting more and more educated in the tradition also because there is more information, there is more access to knowledge that makes this much more interesting and much more complete for people who are looking for this type of belief system.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Baba. Alex?
Yeah, when we talk about espiritismo, we have to be very clear that there are multiple types of espiritismo. We start with the Kardecian, the Allan Kardec version that came from France to the Americas, which by the beginning of the 1920s was possibly the largest practiced tradition outside of any of the Christianities or any of the other Western religions, right? In the Americas. Here in the United States, it was a huge practice, you know, like the Kardecian seances that they would have. In Puerto Rico was with the arrival of Allan Kardecian Mesa Blanca, Espiritismo, right? It mixes in with traditions that were already existing on the island, particularly Bantu traditions, Bantu Congo traditions, being that that in with a different from Cuba, different from Brazil, different from Trinidad, the Yoruba influence in Puerto Rico didn't arrive until the Cubans brought it, because the Yoruba tradition in Puerto Rico made up less than 1% of the total African populations that arrived to Puerto Rico, whereas the Bantu Congo made up close to 70% of the Africans that arrived to Puerto Rico. And so what happens is that the Kardecian Espiritismo mixes in with the already established popular traditions on the island, spiritual traditions, right? So a lot of different, we don't know what they are. We just know that there were traditions that were mixed in with African traditions. Hence now we have, the practice of the madamas y los indios y todas estas tradiciones que no existían, these traditions that didn't exist in the Kardecian European form of Espiritismo. So, yeah, I don't hear you, yeah. I think you're muted.
¿Me oye?
Sí, señora.
I think that what you're describing seems to be like what happened with the Orisha tradition, that Catholic saints were used to cover African gods and goddesses, right? Because my grandmother had Congos and different, imagery to define the ancestors. ¿Verdad? So eran negro, no eran blanco. They were black. They were black imagery.
Yeah, definitely. This goes to what Sister Ayoka was saying earlier. This consciousness, right? This divine consciousness, this community, this collective consciousness, which is a concept that within Bantu Congo traditions is known as Bambula. It is the concept. You know, one of my great teachers, also being Dr. Fukiao, who I had the privilege and the honor of learning from for many years. And he would, when he would come over to the house, I would ask him, I would bombard him with questions. And one thing that we spoke about a lot was bambula. One, as a practitioner of one of the African traditions in Puerto Rico, which is la bomba, you know, bambula is the oldest of the bomba rhythms. But not only is bambula the oldest of the bomba rhythms, it's the oldest of the African musical traditions in the Americas. Right? It gives birth to jazz, to blues, you know, I mean, when we talk about any kind of American music, what we're really talking about is African music redone in the Americas, right? And so, you know, bambula, which is this divine collective consciousness, right, that we are able to tap into, is something that was very prominent within the espiritismo that was practiced in Puerto Rico. And so you see a lot of influences now in these concepts, because then when the Cubans started bringing Santeria and Yoruba, you know, based traditions like Lukumi traditions to Puerto Rico, they also brought in Congo traditions as well. You know, you start seeing the introduction of Mayombe, of the Palo traditions in Puerto Rico as well. And these new traditions that came from Cuba to Puerto Rico also mixed in with El Espiritismo de Puerto Rico, where now people who are not initiated, right, in any of the Yoruba practices or any of the Congo practices, but where espiritismos are now getting mounted by Chango, are now getting mounted by Yemaya in Puerto Rico. It was definitely a big of like a cross, you know, pollination of traditions, and so, you know, I was raised in a family of this type of espiritismo.
Terminaste.
I think I lost you guys. I lost the screen.
Okay. Okay.
So I don't see anyone. I don't know. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see
Yeah, I
anyone.
hear you. What happened?
Oh, there we go. I was able to get you guys back. Yeah. So it was this cross pollination of traditions that gives birth to a lot of the newer forms of espiritismo that were born after the 1930s in Puerto Rico. And so, yeah, I was raised in these traditions and these type of traditions. Everyone in my family, these traditions. When I talk about these traditions, I'm being very specific and el espiritismo de Puerto Rico, ¿verdad? And you know, and then everything else was built on top of that foundation of, you know, of espiritismo.
I think that, in my opinion, there needs to be a lot more looking at the traditions of Puerto Rico, because depending on where you are on Puerto Rico, the influences and the manifestation of ancestors, right, reflect, right, different historical traditions going back. So that work is still to be done. So I'd like to go to Lorelei and Jose, because they've traveled distances, right, to get to what they needed. And I think that you were brought up in California, Jose, originally, and now you're in Puerto Rico.
Yes, so I was born in San Diego, California, and now I'm living in Rio Grande, in Puerto Rico. Yeah.
And then Lorelei, originally from the U.S., went to Brazil.
From Harlem in the South Bronx by way of Jamaica and Brazil.
Okay, so we want to share what moved you, right, to make that journey. Because that's not around the corner. Going to Brazil from El Barrio in the Bronx is a journey.
Wow. I actually wrote an essay about it because I think that's the best way. I'm a writer, so sometimes processing through writing is the most powerful, and it's the way I connect to Ori most essentially. The short version of this story, one of my mentors, he's a Cuban writer and artist, Carlos Moore. You know, I was in the early days of my Yaworaje. And I was there on a Fulbright launching a youth leadership program there in Salvador da Bahia. And, I was like, just trying to understand the mystery, which is already the mistake, right? Understanding the mystery is a mystery for a reason. But understanding why, of all places, I landed in Brazil. But he said, the ancestors brought you here for a reason. You had something to give and something to receive. And that's how I came to understand it. Obviously in New York City, there's so many of these communities, this tradition is thriving. And I knew about it, I was familiar with it. And on an academic level, studied with Daniel Dawson and learned from that way, but, also had friends who were in the tradition. But when I got to Brazil, it was something that spoke to me in a language I understood, but that was also foreign at the same time. And it was very powerful and it was very clear and very, I don't know if I want to say insistent, but it was that sense of resonance that you have found your home, So I visited the Tejedo where I landed originally in 2001 with my twin sister, and then ended up going back and training, or not training, but getting to learn at the feet of Makota Valgina Pinto Ibaye, who was just phenomenal teacher and just leader in the spiritual community in the Angolan tradition of candomblé. And I'll never forget, during one of the readings, because I was so convinced that she's just so brilliant. I was like, this has to be the person I get to study with and, learn with. And she read and she said, no, actually your Tejero, where you belong, is across the street at the Ketu house. And so that's sort of what really launched me into my journey. And then there were, for me, multiple trips back. I was initiated in 2003, but there were particular ways that spirit manifested in me and around me and through me that had never, ever happened any other place. And I called myself a diaspora daughter. I was traveling to Haiti, to Cuba, to South Africa, to Zimbabwe, but there was something in the earth that was just anchoring to me, or that called me and did not let me go. And that was in Brazil. So that's a very short version of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Jose, Dino.
Right. So I guess I want to just my Ori is what guided me toward this tradition. As not exactly as Baba Neil Clark, but music was the thing that caught me and grabbed me, particularly the Afro-Cuban drumming, bata, the bembe, the güiro, all of those. And that's what basically guided me, kind of pushed me through this tradition, moving to LA, being at the Ijo Rumila temple there, eventually taking my first trip to Nigeria in 2004 to Chief Popola's house on the outskirts of Lagos, and seeing the tradition there. I definitely have always given that my Ori definitely was guiding me that whole time to take all these steps. And I actually told myself, I'm gonna go to Nigeria first. I want to see how the traditions practiced there, and then I'll decide when I get back home if I get initiated or not. And I am initiated. I'm going on 17 years. In July is going to be 17 years, so it's been a beautiful journey. But yeah, I wanted to kind of answer a little bit the question that you started off on, what we feel we should be doing, especially from a Latino person like myself that looks like the way I do, and even to all the folks that look a lot lighter than me, is that if you're going into this tradition, please do not appropriate. Please do not just put on the garb and the clothes and I'm an Awo, I'm an Olorisha, because it's a lot of things that you guys have all mentioned. And these are things that I learned from the first temple that I was in Los Angeles, is that if you're going into this, your Ori is going to shift. It's going to have to shift politically, culturally, individually. The first moment that I heard the word communalism. I was like, whoa, what is this? And it was in Los Angeles that I heard this word for the first time. And literally, I was probably the only Latino amongst a lot of African American folks at the temple at the time. So I was just quiet and I listened class after class after class after class. It was very Afrocentric. It was the first time I heard about nationalism, Pan-Africanism. And I was already 25 years old, which is pretty late to hear about these things, but I didn't hear about them all throughout San Diego, in college, a little bit in college, but it wasn't until that temple, and I started realizing that I'm gonna have to change. I am gonna have to change my mindset as a Latino person, and so when I start teaching, and I continue to teach now to folks that look like me or they're lighter than me, I'm like, you guys are gonna have to change. You can't keep doing the things that you're doing and feel that you're going to thrive and do well in this tradition. Either you're gonna shift or things are not gonna work well for you. And one of the main things is that I always tell people is that you have Ori. Yes, you are an individual, but you exist as an individual for the betterment of the community that you find yourself in. And if you can't do that, if that's not something that interests you, this may not be the tradition that you should be following. It should be something else. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I feel that that's something everybody should be doing, but especially folks, again, that look like me or especially lighter than me, need to start shifting those mentalities if you really want to practice this tradition the way it should be practiced, and to give honor to those that started this tradition. So I just wanted to mention that in there.
Thank you for your thoughts. What I'd like to do is, because we're coming to the end, and I want to thank you and honor your presence and participation, and say thank you for teaching us. What are your parting words into the future? Right? What would you say to someone who's on the road now, going into the future? Right? Because these traditions have evolved over time, because they have to evolve, right? We see people took that memory, that knowledge, that intent throughout the globe. So these traditions are not located in one place. Now they're located throughout the world. What is the meaning of that? Is there a meaning of that? Do we have a vision about that? So, Chief Papola, what would you say in the parting words? Not hearing.
Lukumi, Santeria, Okadomble, it is Egbe, it is Ori, it is Ogun, it is Shogu. And there is no one way to the market. There are several roads that leads to the market. Wherever you are, it is the same thing that you are going to meet. The way they do it may be different, but the energy is the same, because the energy is universal. Whichever one we do is the best. All what we need to do is taste it and say that God is fantastic. Go there and embrace spirituality of our ancestors, and then you realize that it is what you need to do because it is appropriate for you. I think that is what I will continue to advise people to do, and to be very consistent in what they are doing. Don't doubt, because that's what the father kept saying. Don't doubt. Don't be in a state of dilemma. Go there and believe what you are doing. If you believe in yourself and you are positive, you are going to get positive results. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll go as the screen, Babania.
Is one thought that I had that I like to piggyback off of what Baba Jose said, and it's something to remember. The qualities that are advocated for good character in traditional culture, in traditional philosophy, are diametrically opposed to the qualities that are advocated for success in modern society. They are diametrically opposed. You know, this idea of promoting oneself or pushing oneself or having ambition, or all of that is fine. But when one emphasizes that attitude, when one emphasizes that mindset, me, I want, I'm going to do, one is not going to be able to easily embody good character because your focus is someplace else. So as Baba Jose said, and the question that you advanced, Marta, about what do we do, I think that one of the best things that we could do is for us to be cognizant of what are the qualities that comprise good character, because they are so absent in the world today. They are in the leadership, without mentioning names, in the leadership of the country, in the leadership of the world. These qualities are so absent in the world. So in order for one to fulfill one's destiny, not shoot oneself in the foot, and to be able to build community, be cognizant of good character, and be aware that diametrically opposed, I purposefully use those words, diametrically opposed to the qualities that are advocated for success in the modern world.
Thank you, Baba. Baba Hochi, as we say goodbye, what are your parting words for now?
I just want to say that the first and most important thing is alignment of your Ori with your Orisha or your Ifa. Make sure that even physically align them and put them in a position where one helps the other, one is close to the other, because that is the beginning of the path. That starts there. The other thing I want to talk to is no matter what the odds are, two things that are really important, and that is integrity. Integrity is the only thing that is going to make everything to stay together and to have an influence and an example on the community around you. And that is the Ori of the community also that needs that. We have to be aware of that and respect. Respect the Ori of everything that is living, or everything that exists. Your shoes, the plant, everything. Make sure that you are aligned with that truth within that little or big soul. Never lose that in context, because that is going to keep you together, that's going to keep you unified. And that's the only way that our belief and our community is going to sustain itself.
Gracias, Baba. Ayoka, what are your next words into the future?
Into the future, and everything that's been said has been so meaningful and valuable. But I wanted to lean in on, expand on something that Chief Baba Neil Clark said about the context of success and what success means and having good character. And I think in the modern world and this new generation, there's this question, and I think we've always asked this question as human beings, like, what is my purpose, right? And that also is connected to Ori, because you ask that question, but the question, some part of that is already answered, that your essence for being, your destiny. But as human beings, we come to this world, we're in the process of remembering what we're here to do. and what we're supposed to do in our trials and tribulations, and we find our true essence. But I think that we need to define as these younger generation, and I can say that as young children who are teenagers, and is that we need to begin to lean into our essence of being and our purpose in an in a context, in an African worldview, which is speaking to what Baba Neal said, which is not about the self, which is about the community, which is about our family, which is about our family lineage, which is about our future. And how do we do that within an African context is that we stay close to our traditions. We stay close to and we hold our elders as we become elders, that we continue to keep our traditions intact, but also leave room for expansion, that we make sure that the knowledge and the past is told to our young children, but there's room to make space for new ways of being and new ways of operating as technology changes, and that we also continue to keep our rituals and community and communal worship in place. Because with rituals, as we know, whatever they are, ebos, meditation, prayer, offerings, appeasements, rituals are the things that keep order and keep us back in alignment and bring, when there's disorder, it brings things back to order. And those are the things that are going to help us with our communal existence, that keeping those things of reverence to ancestors, rituals, practices, our traditions, and making sure that the historical knowledge is shared moving forward. And then also the last thing I'll say is, as we lean into our purpose, as we lean into our collective purpose, as we lean into our family purpose, as we lean into aligned with our values, our core beliefs, and all of those things that align with our Ori, that we have to make sure that we are really clear how we show up. Are we disrupting narratives? Are we disrupting perpetuation of cultural erasure? Are we disrupting, and are we in places and spaces to make sure that the complete and honest truth is being told? And that we're not moving into a space of fear, but that we're moving in a space that we know we've always been, that we can overcome, we can resist, we can accomplish, and making sure that those, because the narratives there's always been a moment where they were one thing and then it's another, and it's trying to erase, and then we're bringing us back there again now. And it's our job as a community to make sure that those narratives, that we, as you say, and as I call you, and I'll tell everybody, I call Ia Martha my social justice titi, and that, that we're speaking truth to power. So I'll end there.
There's a moment. I mean, I'm going through a moment. I'm trying to be cool about it, but the fact that the erasure is so there in our faces, so blatant. There needs to be a calling out on that, because they're removing our books, removing our stories. It's not an option. This is something that we need to stand up about without question,
Absolutely.
without hesitation.
Absolutely. And I came up, and I'll just say this last thing is that I came up in a generation where that our history wasn't told in the schools. My history was taught to me by my parents and my community. So.
But this moment is not new, Martha.
No, it's not new, but I think that the pushback that our communities have put forward have been strong. That's why it's been able to be passed forward, because we have to be conscious about how do we pass forward what we still retain or what we're studying. If there's no spaces to pass them forward, how do we do that? Right? And we do it in community, but right now everybody's being gentrified. I mean, it's a global process of gentrification. And when you don't have home, right? How do you have community when your spaces are being destroyed? And it goes to like what we talked about this afternoon. I mean, I saw 3 women that could have been me homeless, and not because they were in any kind of vice or whatever, you know, which is the first thing you could see they had lost their homes, right? That, and my mother always told me, you look at people and always remember that could have been you, you know. And when I saw these women in a cafeteria in Whole Foods, one of the richest areas in Manhattan, right? And they were homeless. You know, this is not new, but it can't be tolerated. It can't be accepted.
Of every one of us, the ancestors of every one of us, we would not have Orisha in Brazil, in Puerto Rico, in the United States. We would not have Orisha. The Orisha would not be practiced in Nigeria if the ancestors of all of us did not intentionally push back in one way or another. And
so we need intentional pushback now.
Actually,
because the ancestors did push back in different ways, and we have to use that as inspiration today in 2023 to realize that our ancestors did push back.
Absolutely. That's why we have what we have, right? We talked about it, that we have pieces of what it was, but we have something. With this process of destroying communities, destroying families, right? What do you pass forward, and how do you intentionally pass forward, right? And that has to be a choice that we make. How are we going to push it forward, and what are we going to do with that forward, right? So, and not to get into another conversation, Lorelai.
Sure, thank you. It's been such a pleasure and really just an honor to be in conversation with all of you this evening. Martha, I wanted to come back to the question you posed, which is why are our traditions so important? And why do we need to hold on to them now more than ever? For me, it's that necessity comes from the fact that, you know, this is the way that we remember who we are and why we are. You know, I think we've had a collective sort of amnesia in so many ways, you know, disconnection from our identity and our purpose in the world. You know, I think particularly in the age of AI, you know, and social media, we're living with facsimiles of ourselves and representations of ourselves that don't reflect our true purpose. And so connecting to our Ori, connecting to this tradition and doing so in the collective reminds us of sort of that deeper purpose. And also, I think it's a remembrance of the fact that we are the children of those who chose to survive. That's what Baba Neal was talking about. We wouldn't be here without them. You know, and I think so often it's very easy to get caught up in the fact that there are, you know, a record number of tornadoes, or there's bomb cyclones over California, and all these different things happening. But to remember that we are the daughters and sons and children of those who chose to survive. So they, you know, survived and walked through Holocaust, their versions of apocalypse, violence, visceral, you know, all types of things, heartbreak. And they still survived, and they still persisted, and they still resisted. And I think for us, you know, the importance of holding on to those tools and holding on to one another. There's a particular spiritual technology, you know, and I'm a baby in this tradition. I have 20 years, but I'm learning every day. But I feel like, you know, there is a particular spiritual technology that is very powerful and that we need to tap into in the face of what's coming. You know, I think people are very clear that within 3 to 5 years, this world is going to look very different. You know, and so I think of our ancestors before they boarded those boats. What were the seeds and talismans they tucked into their hair? What were the recipes they recited? What were the rituals they remembered so that they could bring all that stuff forward, all those valuable things, those valuable lessons, those valuable tools. And so, you know, those are the things I think are most important right now. And I think ultimately, too, this religion has been historically and is now one of the most powerful ways that we hold on to our humanity and divinity as Black people and as people of the diaspora. And so those are the things we need to hold on to going forward.
Alex, you close for us.
Yeah. Well,
not close. We will do more, but for now.
Well, definitely, lo más importante is remembering your history and your roots, right? And giving honor to that. Was born from a Black Puerto Rican mother, and a white Puerto Rican father, I had, and being born in white skin, although even though my mother is a black woman, I still had to remember that I have privilege. I was born with privilege. And as a practitioner within these traditions, I have to remember that all the time. And this was something that, first and foremost, I needed to learn about who I was as a person, right? Learning about what it meant to be being born in this type of situation, this type of way of understanding. Going back to what Baba Jose said earlier, right? Also making sure that I'm not the one that's in the forefront, that I'm not the one that is being seen as being the one spearheading or leading this, right? Because even though I was born from a black woman, I myself am not a black person. I'm a person of African descent, yes, and I'm very clear of that. And that is something that is very important, that I see that a lot of folks come into these traditions and they try to take over, and they try to put themselves in the forefront, and they try to they get into it for the wrong reasons, right? For a lot of the wrong reasons. And so my first teachings was with my godfather, Florencio Miguel Garzón Ayala, and my padrino always said that you have to follow what your ancestors, the path that your ancestors have put you on. And that was always like my guiding light, following what my ancestors, learning as much as I could about them, learning about their history, learning about the culture, learning about the traditions, looking for people with good character, folks that had experience, that come from tradition, from lineage, because the lineage is very important, and who approach these traditions with respect and honor. Y eso para mí era todo. As long as I was able to follow that road, I knew I was on the right path, and it led me to where I am today.
Thank you all. As I was telling Baba Neil when we were talking this afternoon, just to know that I'm walking on the ground that my dad walked on and that my mom walked on, because I was born in a barrio, but I'm living in Puerto Rico now, empowers me every day, because I know the spirit is there. And we have to have home, and we have to create home. We have to create space, because what we all have been talking about is that we are the children of the children. And we have to make sure that we provide a space for our children going forward to be, so that they can carry forward as others have carried forward to us. So thank you so very much for being part of this conversation. Buenas noches.
Very much.